right. Thank you, Ella. Thank you very much. Okay, so the conversation about grant funding, I always find it very interesting, because this is the burning issue within the nonprofit sector, the big elephant in the room, grant funding. How can we access grant for our nonprofits and all of that? So thank you, Ella, for the invitation. I'm also streaming to my Instagram profile. So when you all get to follow me, you can also see the recording on my profile. So one of the challenges that you face as a nonprofit founder, as an impact leader, or as a social entrepreneur is how you can access funding, adequate funding to support the work that you do. And then the focus is on that, grants. But I always like us to reflect on readiness and positioning. So just a little shift in the conversation from, oh, I want to access grants today, to what can I do to become eligible, and what can I do as a nonprofit founder, as a nonprofit leader, to attract these opportunities into my organization. And so I started this journey over a decade ago, about 11 years ago. And over the years, I have observed that we have thousands of nonprofits, especially on this African continent. We have a lot of nonprofit organizations. New ones are being birthed every day. And we also have enormous problems, a lot of problems still existing in the community. And that still shows us that there's a gap. There's a gap with regards to the solutions we are designing, the projects we are designing, that we are also looking for funding to implement. And so one of the things that should be very clear to us as a nonprofit founder is that you are a problem solver. You are providing a solution to specific problems. And so we need to begin to think from that perspective, to say, okay, we need grants to implement this specific solution that we have come up with in our community. Now, the conversation around grants, most times we want to jump into proposal writing the grant applications and all of that. And midway, you find yourself that you can't even provide the information that the funders are requesting from you. And so that's why I'm retailoring the conversation back to readiness. How do you begin to position your organization? What do you need to do internally within your organization to ensure that when you get to that point of turning in your application, submitting a proposal to the funder, you can provide sufficient information that actually demonstrates your capacity and puts you in a very positive light when they're reviewing your grant applications. So the first thing I want us to reflect on and pay attention to today is that funders give money to support a solution. Funders are giving you money as a nonprofit, not because you're driving charitable projects, but because you are actually bringing something valuable to the communities that you have targeted. And so one of the things you want to do clearly from the get-go is to ensure that your organization as a nonprofit, you have clearly defined the value that you are bringing in. So if, for instance, you are a nonprofit that is supporting women, and then you are asking, how do we get grants for our women empowerment projects or for our women development project? The question is, what exactly are you doing for women? What is the outcome? Or what is the result that you're driving for women that you need grants for? Because these are the questions that you would see in your grant application or when you're engaging with writing grant proposals. So when funders are making a request for applications or putting out a notification of funding, calling for nonprofits to come and apply for a particular opportunity, calling for people to send in their applications, what they're actually doing at that point is to attract people with ideas and then pick ideas that they seem it's credible and is also aligned with your own mission. So your job as a nonprofit founder at this point is to identify opportunities that are best aligned with what you do. So a lot of times I see people making a mistake that you see a particular call for application, or you see an opportunity, a grant opportunity that is open, and then you're rushing in to submit an application. And then midway in the process, you find that you can't even respond to the questions. You can't even respond or provide the details and the information that the funder is requiring of you at that particular moment. That's because the organization is not ready, or the organization is not positioned properly to leverage on that opportunity. So we know most times that when you started a nonprofit organization, usually you started out of passion. You are heavily passionate at that point. You're very emotional about the work you're doing because of a personal story. Maybe you have a personal experience, or an experience of someone that is close to you at that point, and then that inspired you to bridge the gap in the community. Or maybe even if it's not a personal experience, you identified something that is prevalent around you, prevalent in your community, and then passionately you are pushed to do something, and then you are implementing activities, you're engaging people with the community, and then you've decided to incorporate the organization to move forward. But that is just the beginning. Now, running a nonprofit, I always share when I'm having engagements like this, conversations with nonprofit leaders, founders, social entrepreneurs, I always share that there's no difference between you and then a business owner. There's no difference between you and someone who runs a for-profit business, because someone who runs a business is serving customers, and they know that they actually have to deliver a service that is very valuable to customers before they can get paid for their services, or before people can pay for their products. It's the same thing for you as a nonprofit. So one of the mistakes that I've seen that actually limits your ability to access funding is coming from a place of 100% passion. You're very passionate about ending violence against women and girls, or you're passionate about improving access to education. And so you're so invested in the activities you're currently doing, and not improving or innovating on the offerings from your organization. So one of the things that needs to happen before you are able to access grants is to ensure that you have a clear and a viable way of transforming your community. You have a clear process, and I usually advise, as an organization, get into a strategic planning engagement that helps you really create projects or programs that actually work. So these funders receive thousands and hundreds of applications per time, and then maybe they have provided only about opportunities for 10 or 15 organizations. And so what that tells you is that the best and the most relevant project concepts that have been submitted is what the funder is going to approve for a grant opportunity. And so that leaves a lot of organizations disadvantaged at that point. So 3 things that you have to look at in order for your organization to be eligible for funding opportunities and actually scale through an application or a proposal process is that you have to innovate your programs. And I'm sharing this from the grant attraction system, which I've actually designed to help nonprofit founders get their organizations grant ready and able to access funding. So the first step to accessing grants is to create a program that is innovative, not the regular activities that you use to keep your organization operational. Because at that phase, when you do not have grants yet, when you are unable to access grants, you're operating the organizations, you're going to the field to implement activities, you're doing 1 or 2 things in the field. And then the error most times is that you take that activity or that project the way it is, and you put it in an application or in a proposal to a funder. There's a difference between activities that keep your organization operational and then activities that really drive impact and that would be relevant for funders to be able to support the work that you do. So most times when you're operating your organization out of pocket or from donations and support from maybe your community members, board members, or volunteers, people that just are interested in your vision and like the work you do, you're most likely implementing activities that try to raise awareness in a community, or that try to bring some form of education, provide information to people within the communities that you're serving. Because the amount of funding that's available to you at that time is limited, and then you're not able to really go further to support community members to really solve the problems for them. Now, you taking those activities that are operational, that keep your organization going so that you have track record of things that you've been doing, taking that project or that design the way it is and putting it into a proposal is actually will not get you funded, because beyond the information you're providing, before awareness raising, you need to prove to funders that this is actually a model, or this is actually a project that addresses critical issues within the community. For a project that is intended to create some form of economic empowerment for women, just teaching women, for instance, how to run a business alone will be insufficient. But because of the funding that's available to your organization, because you're funding out of pocket, you're most likely just doing that, raising awareness in the community, and then teaching some topics to the women without providing a supportive ecosystem for these women to start up their small-scale businesses, fund it, and then grow it sustainably. So your first step is to ensure that your project is properly designed, it's clear, with clear objectives that addresses issues for the communities that you are working with. So most of you would have maybe attending some kind of workshops or webinars like this before, or from your research, you have observed that you need to do a needs assessment. There's no need getting into a community to implement projects that they don't want. I've had an experience like that before a couple of years ago when they approved the project. I was working a project, and when we got to the community, there was no form of conflict in that community. They've not had any issue of conflict for a couple of years, but someone wrote a proposal somewhere, and probably because of the relationship they've had with the funder, they were able to get it approved. But here in the community, it's not needed. What they actually needed at that time was a livelihood intervention because of the high level of poverty in that community. So you may not have the privilege of being in that position where you have developed relationships with funders, with grant makers, and then when you put in a proposal to them, because of that relationship, they would get it approved. But as a startup, as a young organization, you have to prove yourself and demonstrate that you have capacity, demonstrate that there's proof of concept for the project that you're proposing. It will take you 10 times more work to actually demonstrate that capacity to a funder than an organization that has been in existence for about 20 years and they've had multiple funding opportunities over the years. So if they just put in a proposal to a funder, because of the track record, even if there are technical errors to say that the needs assessment was not properly done, they will get it approved. So in your startup phase, as a new organization or as a growing organization that is trying to access grant funding in order to scale the work you're doing from this standalone activities into projects that actually deliver real outcomes for communities, there's certain expectations that the funders have that you will need to prove. At this point, you have to prove yourself to the funders that, yes, you are worth it, your organization is worth it, and then they can trust you enough to give you $10,000 or $20,000 or $50,000 for a project. So at that point, you have to position your program and your organization in a way that shows you have the capacity to actually solve the problems that are of relevance to the funder. And then what I'm sharing tonight is from the perspective that you have seen a donor call for proposal, or you have seen a request for application, because these are documents that you can just find, maybe if you have signed up to Funds for NGO, or even within your network of other colleagues that are nonprofit founders, and then they share links to you to say, oh, there's a donor call for proposal, and they're giving $10,000 to a couple of organizations, so see if you qualify and apply. At that point, for you to access that money, what the funder is trying to achieve here is to say that we have a particular objective that we want to achieve as a funder. And then we're looking for other nonprofit organizations to help us implement projects that contribute to our objective. So as a nonprofit organization, you need to be very clear and understand that you need to identify opportunities that are relevant for you. So every time I'm talking to nonprofits, I'm always saying this: don't waste your time applying for opportunities or submitting proposals to funders that their mission or their objectives are not similar. You don't share commonalities with the organization. If the organization is working in the environment and your work is around economic development, submitting a proposal at that point would be a waste of time, because the funder will not see it that you are helping them to advance their mission, or you have any value, you're adding any value to the work they're doing. So there needs to be that alignment and that commonality. So from your end as a nonprofit organization, you need to identify opportunities, identify funders that are best aligned with the work you do. So what do donors really want? What are donors expecting from you before they can give an approval to say, we want to fund your organization? I just spoke about capacity, your ability to show that you as a nonprofit organization, you are solving problems. You've done an in-depth assessment of the communities that you're working with. You understand the local issues, and then you have come up with a project. You have come up with an intervention that clearly addresses that problem. And then your proposal, or however you're communicating with the funder, if it's through an email or a donor call for proposal, or you are even doing a pitch, a face-to-face conversation with that funder, they want to know how your project fits in 100% to address the specific issues that you have identified. And recall that these issues must also be very relevant for the funder. If not, you're not going to be having that conversation or be looking at your proposal in the first place. So that alignment must be there. And then you must have a project that is valuable. So the couple of times that I've been able to review applications, I've been able to see the way projects have been designed, one of the key gaps that actually makes proposals fail is the project design. And I always want to spend a lot of time talking about this when I have the opportunity to, because that's what the donor is paying for. That's what the donor is putting money into, giving you money to implement a solution. So it is not necessarily because you have a nonprofit, you are an NGO, you're doing charity work, or you are in the community raising awareness about an issue, but it's actually about problem solving. So one of the shifts that needs to happen for you as a nonprofit leader is to come out from that mindset of charity. I'm doing charity work, I'm helping people, to actually shift into a mind space of problem solving. So beyond doing good, I am helping someone in the community, or I am helping people in the community. When you embrace that thought process of actually solving problems, your mind will be open to more innovative ways, more valuable ways that you can address the issues within the community, and then put up better or more compelling proposals that will get you funded. So it is not about doing good. It's not about helping people in the community, but it's really about solving problems for them. And that is what will get you funded. So when you are able to demonstrate to a funder that you have identified issues or the issues that your community or your organization is addressing through your work, through your programs, that you have actually designed a solution and you can clearly communicate that solution in your application, in your proposal, it actually eases, the challenges or the hurdles with you being able to access funding. So it's a conversation of solving problems. It is a business of solving problems that you are actually engaged in as a nonprofit founder. So that's the first thing that you need to do. And then the second step of the process and meeting the expectation of the funder is your ability to show that you have accountable systems working internally in your organization. So when you see in a grant application or in a proposal template, questions about how your organization is structured, if you have a board, a functional board, or if you have bank accounts, or if you have maybe audited financial statements for the past 3 to 4 years, or how many years the funder is talking about, what the donor is just trying to establish at that moment, and what you need to demonstrate is that you are accountable. The nonprofit sector is a sector that demands high level of accountability. Now, this is because these monies that we are applying for in grants, these are taxpayers' money. I'll share an experience. So I'm here in the UK, and last Sunday in church, Christian Aid, some of you may know Christian Aid. It's a popular non-profit organization, just like Action Aid. So I actually saw the banner of Christian Aid in the church, and I saw buckets. And at some point in the church service, we're being called to make donations for Action Aid. They actually played videos, very compelling and emotional stories of women being faced with hardship, excuse me, women faced with serious economic hardship in West Africa. And I was just smiling because I could really relate, because I'm from West Africa. I could relate with those issues, and I was compelled to give. And my church here in the UK, we have 80% of my church members are actually over 80. We have people in their 70s, we have people in their 80s, and these old people that are retired were giving their £5, their £10, their £2. Other young people that were actually paying taxes too were giving donations to Christian Aid, so that Christian Aid can actually provide grants to organizations like you. So this is where your grant maker is getting their money from. Your grant maker, the organizations that you want to send proposals and applications to, requesting for $10,000, $20,000, they actually have old citizens, taxpayers, people who work 12 hours a day, people who work 50 hours a week, donating funds to the work they do so that they can support interventions like yours in Africa. Apart from donations, your grant makers also, some of them, depending on the model they are operating in, like organizations like USAID, UK Aid, actually have monies from their government supporting interventions in Africa. And so there's a high demand, high level of accountability that is being demanded of the grant makers, of your funders, high level of accountability, asking them to demonstrate what this funding is being used for in Africa or wherever they are giving funding for. So that same level of demand for accountability is projected on you. That is why the funder is asking for your certificate of incorporation, because they want to know and they want to be sure that they are dealing with an entity that is recognized by the government. That's why they're asking for bank statements to see what is your financial habit, or what's the financial culture? What are you spending money on as a nonprofit organization? That's why they're asking for audited financial reports, so they can assess how accountable you are and establish that you have financial integrity or you have the financial capacity to manage the funding that they're going to be given to you. So if you do not meet this eligibility requirements, sometimes you feel that you're being disempowered or you feel that you're being excluded from these opportunities. But I want us to recognize or to realize that the pressure is also on the funder to be able to demonstrate to their own partners and stakeholders that they are investing grants, they are providing support to organizations that are actually credible and are also able to make valuable contributions to their mission as a grant maker. So at this point, in order for you to be able to access grants, you need to begin to put in place systems and structure within your nonprofit, even if you're just starting today, that will enable you demonstrate this level of accountability and integrity to a funder so that you can gain their trust. So when you submit, when you are approaching a funder, you submit a grant proposal and application, and then part of the questions where they are asking you, are you registered? You're saying no. Do you have financial reports? You're saying no. What have you done in the last 2 years? You are not able to really articulate in a very compelling and clear way the impacts that you have been making through your work over time. They see you as a risk to their organization. They are not able to trust you. They are not able to assess and establish that you can actually implement that project, or if they give you the money, you would actually do the work that you have proposed to do. So these measures that funders have actually put in place is for their protection as a grant-making organization, and also for the protection of the community, because you're actually proposing that you want to implement a solution to a problem in the community. And so they are trusting you on behalf of that community so that you can go and drive that solution. And so if they make a mistake by giving $20,000 to an organization that is not really delivering on that project, it's a loss to the community. And so, because when I started this conversation about 30 minutes ago, I said, let's reflect on something. We have thousands of nonprofits across Africa, if not millions of nonprofits. New nonprofits are being established every day. Doesn't it surprise you that Africa is still the way it is? That's because of clear gaps that exist within the sector. So as a nonprofit founder, you now need to begin to rise up to your responsibility to be able to deliver programs that really work, deliver programs that really drive change in the community. Clearly assess issues that you have identified in the community, do a deep analysis to understand what the issues are, so that when you come up with a project and peradventure you are able to get an approval for your project, you can drive meaningful and measurable impact in the community. So I posted a video on YouTube about a year ago, and I've recorded about over 5,000 views in that video. And one of the questions asked that I find really very relevant, someone was asking, how do we even measure our impact? Because it is one of the things that you also need to show to funders before you can access grants for your organization. You need to establish, beyond establishing the fact that you have capacity, establishing the fact that you are accountable because you have all the processes and systems functioning in your organization that shows that we are an accountable organization. You need to also demonstrate impact, the impact that you have been contributing to over time and what you are set to do now that you are now asking for funding for. So when you're asking for $10,000, you're asking for $20,000. $20,000 is not to pay salaries or pay rent. That the funder is not interested in that. The funder is not interested in your staff salaries, in your rent, in your operational costs. What the funder is interested in is the solution and the impact that communities would experience. The target groups, if you're targeting entrepreneurs and you're trying to increase their profitability, or the sustainability of their businesses. That is what the funder wants to know. What is the impact? What is the clear impact that this nonprofit is proposing? So most times the proposal is just full of fluff, activities here and there that are disorganized, that are not really coordinated to bring about a clear change in the community. So positioning yourself as a nonprofit to be able to access funding, even as small as $1,000 or as much as $100,000 or more, you need to demonstrate impact, your before and after. So because a question, like the last call for proposal I was looking at before I sent it to people on my email list, one of the opportunities specifically stated that they are looking for a nonprofit organization with a minimum of 5 years experience implementing similar programs. That criteria is actually set so that the grant maker or the funder at this point will be able to call forth organizations that have a track record of solving those problems, or an agricultural project. So they're not looking for an organization that was established last year that really has no proof or track record of impact over time, but an organization that can demonstrate that in the last 5 years, this is the extent of the work that we have done. This is how we have solved problems for communities, and we are bringing a proposal for you to help us so that we can scale up our work, so that we can reach more people with our project. So it is a business. And that was why earlier I said you need to shift from this thought process of charity work, that we're just doing charity or we're helping people, and begin to adopt a business mindset. A business mindset where you need to demonstrate value, the value that you have been creating over time, and what you are proposing to do for you to be giving that grant funding. The funder is not just giving you money because you're a nonprofit. No, it's because you want to address a problem. And so these are the questions that you need to begin to answer in order for you to be eligible, in order for you to prepare yourself to engage with a funder. And most times that engagement is through a proposal, through an application. And so finally, we just have about a few minutes before we end the webinar tonight. I'll just share a bit about the proposal writing process and how you can approach it to improve your chances of accessing grant funding for your organization. Now, I've shared a bit about all the readiness systems, what you need to, how you need to prove yourself to the funder, how you need to demonstrate that you are capable or you're eligible. Regardless of that, there are opportunities that will not ask for an arm and a leg. There are opportunities that are also available that you qualify for even at the stage where you currently are. Whether you just started, you incorporated your organization 2 years ago, you just have few activities that you've implemented, there are still small grant opportunities available. But I want us to consciously look at the grant writing process, the process of you putting up your proposal or putting an application to a funder is actually a process where you are asking for money to drive solutions. So that being established, what are the frequent mistakes that actually make proposals fail? And so you are putting up an application, you're putting up proposals over and over and over again, and then you're getting rejections. Now, the most common mistake, and then how to address it, is that your analysis is insufficient. So for some of you that have written a proposal before, or you've submitted an application before, one of the things you would see on the template is that the funder is asking you to provide an overview of the target group that you want to support. Because the proposal is a very direct process, is a straightforward process. This is the project. You have developed a project to target a specific group of people to solve problems for them. In the application or in the proposal document, you need to give an overview, details detailed information that describes the situation within the community and why it is essential for the funder to support that project at that particular time. So if your proposal contains insufficient information, so maybe that particular template, the donor has asked you to give an overview in about 500 words or 300 words, or maybe 1 page or 2 pages. The funder is trying to understand how life is for the groups that you are proposing to support. And so if you do not provide detailed information, if you do not provide a deep analysis that actually describes what the situation actually is, how children are unable to access quality education, how the infrastructure is, and there's no sufficient infrastructure in the particular community where you're working, or maybe there are no teachers, and then even when they are available, when there are teachers are overworked. Give a detailed description of what the situation is and how it connects with what you intend to do while asking for that amount of money. So that is one of the gaps in most proposals that fail. So you have inadequate or insufficient description of what the community is going through, what the problem is in the community, and how your project is the best intervention at that point in time. Because most times, just after the executive summary, that's the first thing the funder wants to know. Let me see the profile of these people. Who are you supporting? This category of people, do they even fall within the groups of interest that the particular funding has been established for? So the second mistake is that most proposals do not have very clear objectives and outcomes. That's because over time, most nonprofits were, you're caught up in the web of implementing activities, you're caught up in the web of doing training, doing media dialogues, media promotions, and then it is not clear what specific outcome that this work is actually contributing to. So one of the questions you want to ask yourself while putting up your proposal or submitting an application, these activities that you're asking for money to implement, the trainings that you want to do, the communication materials that you want to develop, that you need funding for, these seed grants and all of that that you want to provide to women or young people. Over time, what new experiences will it shape for this particular group? What will change in their lives? What's the clear 1, 2, 3 new conditions that will happen that your project will be able to create for these communities? And how will this project, or how will these activities contributing to making that happen for the community? That is what you are explaining in the whole grant application or in the whole proposal that you're writing. You are explaining, you're pitching, you're communicating the value that you're going to be providing for this specific target group to a funder. And so you need to take out time as a nonprofit founder to put together, to begin to articulate what is it that we're trying to do as an organization. So I know most times when you set up your organization, you quickly put together a mission statement, a vision statement, or objectives. Or maybe it is even the lawyer that facilitated the registration process that came up with those objectives for you. And so you don't even know clearly what the objectives of your organization are, or what the objective of that particular project you are trying to get funding for. So like I just explained, the question you're trying to answer at this point in time is, what will the new situation be like? If you have provided training to women, if you've provided skills development opportunities to them, at the end of the day, what will be the new economic circumstance, or what will be the new economic situation that these women will begin to experience after you have implemented your project? So most times it's challenging for nonprofit founders to really articulate and communicate the outcomes of the work they do. So as part of your process for being able to assess funding for the work you do, you need to like put yourself in the mind of this person that you're trying to give this application to, the person you're trying to apply to grant funding for, the person that's going to be looking at your proposal, that's going to be assessing or your request that you have put in. What are they trying to achieve? And so the document, one of the things that you need to really do after you ensure that your organization is properly structured, you've ensured that you have met with the funder's eligibility criteria, you need to understand what is this funder trying to achieve through this call for proposal or through the call for application. Before you even start writing, before you even start designing your project that you want to request for funding for, you need to be very clear that you understand what the funder is trying to achieve. Every amount of money that's being set aside by a donor is set with a clear objective, is set with a clear outcome, a clear change or impact that that funder is trying to achieve. And so if you do not tailor your project proposal, if you do not tailor your application to speak to what that funder is trying to achieve, your application will be rejected. So the call for application, normally you will have a call for application document, you have a notification of funding, or maybe it's just a web page that's on the funder's website that just gives details of what they are trying to do with that particular grant, all of the eligibility criteria. Beyond spending time to say, okay, we are eligible for this opportunity, we have all the requirements that you're asking for. What is the change that this funder is trying to seek? So that you can tailor your proposal, you can write the story about the work you have been doing and what you intend to do to communicate also what the funder is trying to achieve. Because before they give you money, the money is to help them advance their mission. The money is to help them advance their objective. So they'll be looking at projects that 100% help them, 100% align with where they are trying to go, where they are trying to go with their organization. That is when you can get your project approved. So I've shared a couple of thoughts with us tonight that I want us to reflect on. And then the purpose of this conversation is for you to do an assessment and identify the gaps, identify where you have been getting it wrong, so that you can begin to take action that move you closer to the funding opportunities that you require for the work that you do. So your mission is actually valuable. The work you've been doing, you did not just set yourself up on a journey as a non-profit founder or as a social entrepreneur without knowing that, oh, I want to deliver value. But most of the time, we are unable to recognize the gaps in what we do in our organizations and able to come up with, okay, these are specific action points that I need to take part time. And that's because of the level of passion. I always say that the nonprofit sector these are highly passionate, passion-driven people. And so sometimes you're unable to make that disconnect to say, let me step out for a moment and critically assess where I am as a nonprofit leader. Critically assess how valuable is the work we're doing in this organization. Most times it's difficult for you to make that objective assessment, but it's something that you must do. It's something that you need to look at your projects carefully and see, does this project actually meet the requirements for it to be funded? Have we set up clear monitoring and evaluation systems that help us to track the impact of the work we're doing and also help us to communicate the value of the work we're doing to funders? So you need, from time to time, you need to step back and then assess the organization so that you can identify those gaps and really leverage on opportunities such as this, training opportunities that are available to strengthen your capacity as a nonprofit. Because the process of assessing grants or attracting grant funding for the work you do is highly competitive. As you can see, there are quite a number of you in this webinar tonight, not to talk of, you know, other organizations out there competing for the same grant funding opportunities that you are trying to assess or that you are trying to leverage on. So what this tells you is that you need to wake up to your responsibility, or wake up to the reality that you need to be evolving. The same activities that you implement to keep you operational, that you implement to say that we're still here, we're still doing the work, is different from what you are putting in your proposal. So from time to time, you need to do that self-assessment, identify the gaps within your organization, know what is holding you back. If over time you're looking at call for applications and the funder keep requesting for audited financial reports, 5 years down the line, you are yet to take action to ensure that your organization is able to provide those documents to funders. It's one of the things holding you back. So if you don't do a self-assessment, if you don't reflect to identify these gaps within your organization and then take action. So if the funder requires audited reports, how can I start today to begin to put my books in order so that at the end of the year, you can actually audit your accounts? And you know that whichever opportunity that you are going to apply for, it will not be an audited financial report that will hold you back. So when we have conversations like this, when you attend webinars, when you attend live sessions like this, is for you to reflect and identify, where am I getting it wrong? What are the gaps existing? What can I begin to do today to actually increase the chances of being funded? Because you're not the only one on the long queue of organizations trying to access funding. You're competing with other organizations. And so every day, you must be positioning yourself. You must become more strategic about how you're showing up, how you're communicating the value of the work you're doing in your organizations to funders. And you need to ensure, finally, that you're actually engaging with funders that are relevant for the work you do. If you have met all the eligibility requirements, you have wonderful programs, and you take that program and put it in a proposal to the wrong funders, it's not going to give you results. So at this point, we'll be taking questions because Hexa Media has actually informed me that the session is for 6 minutes to 9. So if you have questions, I'd like to see the chat area for your questions, and then we'll respond to them.
Great. Wonderful. Ha! So you shattered a lot of tables that I have always been shattering and telling everyone, guys, you need to have your structure. You need to have a particular solution you are trying to solve. If you're just working with your heart, it's good, but it will not get you far. So I think she has, dropped a lot of gems here for people that have joined us from the beginning. So we're looking through the chats now. I see you. Great presentation, Ma. Thank you so much, Ma. Awesome presentation, nice conversation. We're waiting for your questions. Please mute your mics like we agreed when we first started. Kindly mute your mics. So we're waiting for your questions. Okay, Ruke, I can see a question here. What's the best way to respond to project sustainability in a project?
All right. That question is from Rogers, I guess.
Yes, it's from Rogers.
Okay. So when a funder is asking you about sustainability, they're trying to see that what is going to happen after the funding ends. So if you are asking for $25,000 to implement a particular project, the funder wants to be very clear. When the $25,000 funding ends, will the community revert back to where they were before the project? So bearing this in mind, that you need to be sure, okay, how will this project continue when this grant ends, or even if we have finished implementation, one of the questions that sustainability answers is that how would community members continue to experience the benefits? How would community members continually experience the change and the results that the project has delivered to them after we have exited the community? So if, for instance, you're doing maybe an education project, you're trying to improve access to quality education in a community, one of the ways that you can demonstrate sustainability is to ensure that you are working with existing institutions within that community. You are also building their capacity, so that when you end your project after 2-3 years or 1 year and you take your exit from that local government or from that community, the local government council, you have already built their capacity, or maybe the education officer there, or the principal, the schools there, you have actually trained them, you have actually empowered them with knowledge, with tools that they can continue to ensure that children have quality access to education when you have left. So sustainability is a broad conversation, but 2 quick questions that you can answer while designing your project that will ensure that you have built in sustainability into your strategy is: what happens after the money finishes? How would communities continue to enjoy the benefits, continue to enjoy the outcomes, continue to experience the solutions even while we have left the community? So your mind will be open to ideas to say, okay, I think I should do ABC to ensure that when we leave, there will be continuity. So that's how you respond to the sustainability question. Sustainability is not only financial, it's just say, how will the solutions continue? How will people continue to experience benefits after the project has ended? And then I can see a question here. If you will be working with out-of-pocket donations before incorporation, how do you present your audited financial records? Beautiful. Now, all of the things I've shared with us tonight are actually, things that inspired me to even start the work I am doing and to design the programs. So I designed a specific program, the grant attraction system, that works through the entirety of what is the system that we need to have in place in our nonprofit that makes us eligible to whatever kind of funding we want to apply for, and also make us attract grants. How do we position ourselves as an attractive organization to access $10,000 to $100,000 in funding? So your startup phase is actually what I call a readiness phase. So you start up an organization from day one to be ready to assess funding opportunities. So the same way you will be accountable and intentional with a donor grant, that is the same attitude you approach your out-of-pocket spending. So normally when you have grants, you don't just wake up one day and say, we want to buy a laptop or we want to buy 200 plates of lunch to take to a community. You will follow a standard operating process. There must be documentation. So someone must have to raise a requisition, then a project manager, a project coordinator will have to review, approve. You as the executive director will approve it. And then these documents will show as evidence that supports that transaction. Usually that's what you retire to fund. When you are using their money, the last dollar, pound, or kobo, you must show documentation for how that money, who approved it, who approved that spending, where did it pass through, where did the money go to. The documentation must show. So it is the same thing when you are spending out of pocket. So as a nonprofit founder, instead of just spending money from your personal accounts, you need to put that money in the organization's account to show as a donation from you. So if you're running a nonprofit, the name of your nonprofit is ABC Foundation, and your name is Ella. Ella is donating 150,000 to ABC Foundation. Ella should not be spending that money out of her account, but that money should be donated. She should send that money into the organization's account, and then the organization should treat it as a grant. So before any money is spent, the documentations must be completed. That is the way you can show that your organization has financial integrity. So the way you treat your self-funding phase is actually another way of demonstrating that you have capacity to the funder. So as a small organization, you're operating out of pocket, whatever you want to spend, donate it to the nonprofit. So it will enter your books as maybe board donations, one of the subjects that you can use for it to capture that inflow. Ella is the founder. She has sent in 100,000 into ABC account. It has to be entered into the books that this is donation from Ella. Before that 100,000 should be spent, there needs to be documentation. It can be as simple as an email to the program officer is raising to the ED to say, "Ma, dear ma, for this activity that needs to hold in community XYZ, we will need 50 bottles of water, 50 plates of lunch, this and that," and it's approved, and that shows the documentation behind that transaction. Maybe Ella, we could have another session that talks about governance or that talks about structure, so people can clearly know that, okay, this startup phase, how do we use our monies out of pocket to now help us become eligible for funding? Because you can be stuck here for the next 10 years, spending money out of pocket, and you will not still be able to show that you have a detailed financial statement because of that thinking, I'm spending out of money. So it is your money, but treat it as you because you are a separate entity from the organization. Ella is a separate entity from ABC Foundation. So Ella should not be spending from our account on behalf of the foundation, but donating it to the other legal entity, which is the foundation. And then from the foundation's account, spending is made. Then those documentation are put in place. At the end of the year, your accounts will be audited. Then you can have a financial report.
Wonderful. I think we have two last questions that we'll take. Before I remember you said you had something for everyone here before they go. You were talking about the Grant Mastery Program. So we'll just take the last two questions, and then you tell us about the Grant Mastery Program for people that are interested. So
okay.
I have.
So what are the two last questions?
Yeah, I have. Is it possible? Okay. How can an infant NGO like 1 year in operation present an audited account? I don't know if this is related to what you just answered already.
Okay.
Yeah. And then,
it's kind of related. So if you're 1 year or if you're less than 1 year, you don't have a full financial year that can be audited. So at that point in time, the kind of opportunities you should be applying for are opportunities that you are eligible for. Small grants or grant opportunities that are open for organizations that are not even incorporated yet, or just startup organizations that do not require you of submitting an audited report. But because you're an infant organization, it's just 1 year. Try to get your 1 year books in order. Where are the receipts for the spending that you have done? Did you spend the money? Because sometimes, we have like 3 bank accounts. Like me, I have before leaving Nigeria, I had like 3-4 bank accounts. So I can spend from assets, so maybe you spend for these 4 different accounts. How do you go about it? You need to speak to an accountant. You need to speak to an accountant and explain your situation to them, and they will share with you how best to address that situation. But if you're just spending from one account, which is the non-profit account, try to put up the documentation for your spending, especially the receipts, the invoices, because you cannot approach an auditor that they should come and audited your account when there are no receipts to show that this is what you purchased. What is the auditing? Because the receipt is the evidence of money spent. So if you spent money and there is no receipt, there's a problem, you may need to go back to those vendors and say, please, that's a coaching program I bought from you. Please, can you give me receipts for it? Or this hall that we booked to do our training, please, I need a receipt for it. Because that's what the auditor is going to work with.
Okay. So the last question is, how do you indicate key milestones when applying for a grant?
Okay. So key milestones means different things to different funders. For a particular, so that's why you need to look at the funder's application template closely. Some of them will be gracious enough to give you an explanation. Most of them will give you guidelines on what they mean by their key milestone. So funder A key milestone might be at the end of, maybe you say it's a 2 years project. So every quarter, so at the end of quarter 1, what would have been achieved? Maybe 300 people would have been trained. Then at the end of quarter 2, maybe out of the 300 people, 200 people may have been placed into apprenticeship opportunities, just like that. That will be for a particular funder. So another funder, key milestones may just be, at the end of the entire project, what are the deliverables? So you're saying that at the end of 2025, 700 women had received access to credit facilities. 70% of our target groups, or 70% of our population, have SMEs that are bringing in revenue of a minimum of $500 a quarter or $500 a month. So milestone is the funder is saying the achievements per time as we are moving to the end of the project, what is changing. That is where a strong M&E plan comes into place, where you have developed very strong key performance indicators, or in this case, objectively verifiable indicators to say, the proportion of women that have received access to credit support, the proportion of target participants that have established SMEs 6 months into the program. So it's different for a funder. So for a space, you cannot take milestones in a particular proposal and put it into another application. You must retailor it into how the funder has asked you to present that milestone. If they are just indicators or they are quarterly targets or at the end of the year. But you just need to understand that they're trying to tell you, ask what is changing as we are moving, what is changing as we are going on in the project.
Okay, I see more questions coming in.
Gone through all the questions.
Yeah, I see more questions coming in. I'm sorry, we may not be able to take any more questions. We've kept Rukewe for longer than anticipated. So she will just be telling us about the grant readiness program and also the grant proposal program that is available to everyone who is interested. Like I said before, there is going to be a replay for this. You will get it in your email box next week, please. So Rukewe, please tell us about the grant program that is available for everyone.
Okay, so thank you very much, Ella. So please, you remember to share the link to the book, What Donors Want, so everybody can just have access to that book. So okay. My two core programs are this. The first one is a grants attraction system, and it is the program that helps you position your nonprofit organization to be able to access grants. So all of the things I've taught today, from demonstrating your impact, designing projects that actually meet the needs of communities and align with the expectations of funders, building structure in your organization, putting policies in place to guide documentation, identifying funders that are best aligned with you. So it's an entire system that prepares your nonprofit to become eligible for funding and then be able to engage with funders to access grant. That's one program, grant attraction system. It's available at 3 levels. So you can either get it as an online course or get it as you get an online course and a 2-hour strategy session with me, or I work with you one-on-one for 8 weeks. where I work with you to develop your strategic plan, develop your project plan, budgets, the proposal, policy framework, everything that I teach in the online course, I work with you to implement it in your organization. So that's one of my core program. And the other one is the Grantwriting Mastery. It's actually a 5 weeks live coaching program where I work with nonprofits to be able to write proposals on their own. So I usually do live workshops, 2 days trainings, online courses are there. And then when I assess the work I have done over time, I realized that the best results that we have achieved for our participants that have gotten grants as much as $50,000, $30,000. Like on Sunday, one of them sent me a message that she got approved for UN, one of UN project, for another $30,000, was when they were in that experience where I was working with them in groups to be able to write proposals. So there's an extent to what you can do with just information, and then the results you get when you have that implementation support, you have accountability, that push to be able to write proposals. And then this program is designed for people who have even never written a proposal before, or you've written quite a couple of proposals before and you've not received funding, you're not getting the approvals that you need. So it runs for 5 weeks. We hold weekly coaching and co-work sessions on Saturdays. So you have access to the workshops. The workshops are already pre-recorded from one of our sessions. You must watch the training. You also get tools, like you get sample funded proposal, which is my very first successful proposal. I always rant about it because about 7 years ago, it was my first, and the money was substantial. It was £98,000 after so many trials. So I put that proposal in the kit to give people guidance on what they need to do, sample applications, call for proposal, to give you that experience as if you're actually applying for a grant. And always encourage participants that after the training, that project you worked on in the coaching program, submit it to a funder, because the first cohort, someone submitted is only got $5,000, another person 25,000 euros. So the results actually come from implementation. And so I use that mindset to structure the coaching program to say, beyond the training, beyond the resources, the tools that people get, they are in that environment where every week they're working on a part of the proposal. And as we are finishing the program in the 5th week, you have a fully completed project proposal in your hand that you can use to approach funders. So that is the Grantwriting Mastery program. It runs for 5 weeks and we're going live by July. So it will run from July 1st to 29th. So if you're interested in that program, I would put the link. I'll just copy the link and paste it in the chat area. The program is $75,000 with an early bird discount of people who join the wait list. People who join the wait list and then register within the early bird window that I'm going to provide will get a 40% discount. So instead of paying $75,000 for the 5 weeks, you only get to pay $45,000. It's going to run for 5 weeks. And then after that, for someone here who has attended my training before, I can see Ebenezer here, you'll also be a part of my accountability group. I'm structuring it in a way that once a month we have coaching calls where we hold ourselves accountable. What have you done to push revenue into your organization for the month and all of that? So it's a supportive community where people get to inspire each other. Someone is sharing a story of how they just got a grant. You know that I am sleeping. No, I have to submit a proposal tomorrow or next week. So that's what it offers you. I would get the link up. I'll paste the link right away in the chat area, so you can join the wait list and then you get the 40% discount when we go live.
So thank you.
So over to you, Ella, while I just retrieve the link.
Thank you so much
and put it in the chat area.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.